So one of the things that you're going to want to do often with a canvas is to draw images into it. So let's say you're building a game and you have some sprites that you created in Photoshop, which are just PNG files. You need to be able to actually draw those images into your canvas element, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do here. So I already have my canvas element created, again, 800 by 600. And then in the init function, I'm going to get my context. So I'm going to say var ctx. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it here. Instead of creating a separate canvas variable, what I'm going to show you here is a way to create it by just chaining these calls together, which is how I do it. So I say document.get element by ID, canvas, and then just say from there dot get context 2D. And that gets me directly to the context so I can start working with the canvas. If I want to draw an image into the canvas, I can start with an existing HTML image tag that, let's say, I have on my page. But typically, you're going to want to actually load that into a new JavaScript image object. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it img for image is equal to new image. And now I'm going to set the source property of my image. So image.src. And now I give a string to where to find that image from. In the exercise files, I actually have an image called rusty.jpg, and that's just a photo of my dog Rusty. And I've copied that out of the exercise files onto the desktop. So I'm just going to put in rusty.jpg. And just by doing that, it's going to start loading that image in. Before I can actually draw that image to the canvas, I need to wait until the image is finished loading, obviously. So to do that, I'm going to listen to the onload event of the image object. And I'm just going to do an inline anonymous function here. So image.onload is equal to function. And inside of this now, I can put the code needed to draw that image onto the canvas. So I'm going to say ctx, and then I'm going to call the drawImage function. To that, I actually need to pass in the image element that I want to draw. But since I'm actually in the image onload event handler, I can just pass in this, because in this case, this refers to that image element. And the next thing to pass in is the X and the Y position of where I actually want to place this image in the canvas. So I'm just going to put it at 30 and then at 0, like that. So if I save this now and go over to Chrome, you can see we now have that image, which is now drawn into our canvas element. So there are multiple overloads of this draw image method. The next thing that I can use here is to actually scale this down. So let's say I want to draw this image into the canvas, but I want to scale it first. I'm going to keep this the way it is, draw image. I want to draw that image object. I'm going to place it at 30 and at 0. But then I'm going to actually resize this to resize the image to 100 by 100. And that's essentially going to take the image, squash it down to 100 by 100, and then use that to paint into the canvas. So you can see now it's actually taken the image, squashed it so that it fits into 100 by 100 pixels, and then painted that into the canvas. So the final thing that I can do is I can actually extract a certain part of that JPEG. So just draw a specific region of that JPEG and put that into the canvas. Now, this is a really important technique when you want to start dealing with sprite sheets, which we're going to cover later in this chapter, where you have a bunch of different images squashed onto a single PNG, and you need to be able to extract a certain portion of that. What we're going to first do is give the X and the Y position for where we want to start copying the pixels from inside of that JPEG. So I'm going to start X and Y of 50. Then the next two parameters are the width and the height of how many pixels to grab from that starting position. Grab 200 pixels for both the width and the height. Now the next two parameters are the X and the Y position of where we want to paste those pixels into our canvas. I'm just going to put it at 0, 0. And then lastly, if we wanted to, we can actually scale that down as well. Let's say I want it down to a different size. For our purposes here, I'm going to keep it at the size that I actually extracted it at, which is 150. So now if we come back here, we can see I've sampled just that specific region of that JPEG and used that to paste it into the canvas. With this draw image method, you have 3 overloads available. The first, if you just want to draw the entire image to a certain X and Y position. The second is if you want to draw the entire image, but then scale it down to a certain amount or up. And then lastly, the draw image overload, which allows you to extract just a certain portion of the source image file and take that specific portion and paint it to the canvas. Now, another thing with this draw image method is that you can also draw other canvas objects as well. And we'll get to that later in this chapter about why you would want to do that. But for drawing images, you have a lot of flexibility. And again, this is very similar to the copy pixels method that you have with the bitmap data class in Flash.